Hi guys, in a sort of twisted irony, just a day after the 3rd anniversary of the UK leaving the EU, you have Mr. Brexit himself, the man who got Brexit done, the oven-ready deal chef Boris Johnson, appearing at the Atlantic Council, throwing his support behind Ukraine joining the EU. So he was originally asked about whether he would support Ukraine becoming part of NATO, and he rightly said that if the country had been part of the alliance, it's likely that we would have avoided war last year. But his EU comments are probably the biggest eyebrow raiser. Have a listen.
I've now come to the conclusion that Putin has demolished any objections to Ukrainian membership. You know, if the objection was that we were going to provoke Russian aggression, well, that is now transparently absurd. Russian aggression has followed our failure to admit Ukraine into NATO. Not having Ukraine in NATO produced the worst war in Europe for 80 years. Okay? What is needed now is clarity and simplicity and the security and stability that the North Atlantic Alliance gives. And I believe that once this war is done and once the Ukrainians have won, then yes, they should begin the process of induction both to NATO and, of course, to the EU.
Wow! Induction to NATO and, of course, the EU. So he's supportive of Ukraine joining the EU. This is the guy who told people, you know, Britain's place is outside Europe. Britain's place is unshackled from the EU. This is a guy who was voted for. People came out and voted for Boris Johnson, even though they were voting for their local representative in 2019, because he would get Brexit done. He's the one who, you know, pulled the lever. He's the one who ended the debate. You know, everyone else was squabbling over Brexit. Boris was the man. And people voted for him because he'd get Brexit done. Because he's the one who believed in Brexit. And now he's here at the Atlantic Council advocating for a country to join the EU. Not for Britain, but for Ukraine. Why? Well, because Boris Johnson is a charlatan. Boris Johnson is two-faced. Boris Johnson, I believe, and I've said this before, if the vote had gone the other way, Boris Johnson would have presented himself as a pro-European statesman. Like many other Tories, the ones who voted Remain and then became Brexiteers, like Liz Truss and others. You know, if the vote had gone the other way, you'd have had Brexiteers become pro-European statesmen and women to further their careers. Boris Johnson is the only thing Boris Johnson cares about is furthering his career. And maybe he's a little bit upset now. Maybe he's a bit disappointed that the Brexit vote actually went that way because, you know, he's had a good run, but he'd like, you know, to be recognized as some sort of international statesman. And if, you know, the UK had voted to remain and he eventually became prime minister in some way, that's what he would have presented himself as. But, you know, this is a guy who campaigned for the UK to leave the EU, and now he's here advocating for Ukraine to join the EU. I'd love to know his reasons. Why do you think, Boris, that Ukraine should join the EU? I'd love to hear some of the answers to that. What is his thinking on that? And of course, we cannot apply that thinking to the United Kingdom because, you know, reasons. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what do you think about all of this? As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.